Welcome back to Project Command. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Chief Eddie Buchanan, former Assistant Chief with Hanover Fire and EMS in Virginia, and one of the most influential voices in the modern training and tactics conversation. Eddie's been in the fire service since 1982, served as the president of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors, and was awarded the ISFSI's George D. Post Instructor of the Year for his work on Slice RS and helping departments turn fire dynamics research into street-ready decision-making. He's a longtime contributor to the profession through fire engineering and FDIC, serving on their editorial advisory boards and authoring the Volunteer Training Officers Handbook and co-authoring the Training Officers Handbook, which have shaped how training officers build programs all over the country. And in recent years, Eddie's been pushing the fire service forward on the data and technology side, hosting conversations that bridge operations, leadership, and the tools that are changing how we measure risk, readiness, and performance. Today, he's also working in the industry space as the co-host of the Fire Engineering, Fire Service, Data, and Tech Talk podcast. Chief Buchanan, thank you for being here.
It's an honor to be here with you, sir. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine. We got a lot to cover today. But before we get into all that, I was hoping you could just kind of tell us about your journey. How did you get where you are and walk us through some of the different roles you've had?
I always kind of joke. My whole career was literally an accident, just kind of random things happening one after another. And one of my buddies, I grew up down the street from a volunteer fire station. And we were riding our bicycles by one day, and my buddy goes, "I wonder how old you have to be in the fire department." And I'm like, "Man, we're on bicycles, surely older than us, And so we stopped in, and within 10, 15 minutes, we were washing a truck. And I just kind of never left. I started out as a volunteer, as a cadet. Coming up back in the early 80s, things were kind of a little bit looser as far as how things were done with policy and procedures. So we got to do a lot. We got to be involved with a lot. It was really cool. Awesome time to be there. Ended up becoming a volunteer chief over I think that was like 15 years, something like that. Ended up being a volunteer chief. And then our county department started to really grow a lot. We started to transition from a primarily volunteer fire department into a combination fire department. And I got hired on as an instructor to come in and start to train all of our folks. And we were a little behind the eight ball when I got there. We had a policy that required firefighter 1 and 2. And remember, this is, now we're in the early 90s. And we had policies that required that, but it wasn't necessarily enforced. Mm-hmm. So I had about 250 people I had to crunch through firefighter 1 and 2 in a big hurry. And that's where like the first book actually started, kind of came from, was the process we learned. A guy named Greg Martin and myself, we had to figure it out, and we did, So ended up working on that first book back then. Went up through the ranks, was at training for a long time, did a lot of work kind of building our training division. And then was in ops. I was the ops chief for a while. When I retired, I was the administrative chief. So working in administration, logistics, human resources, budget, all the things that go with that. And when I retired about 3 years ago, I ended up working for a data analytics company, Deccan International. Worked there for about 3 years, and I just recently switched to go to work with First Do, which is well, we're a little bit of everything now. Started out as a pre-planned platform, and now it's kind of become a whole thing. So it's one of the things I've been blessed with the whole way through my career. I've always encountered the right people at the right time to make things happen. I had the right chiefs at the right time to help me in my career that, gave me opportunities that otherwise I would not have had. I applied to all the fire departments in the Richmond metro area when I was a kid, coming up, whatever, early 20s, 1920s. And it was frustrating trying to get a job because, the first couple of whacks I took at it, I didn't get hired. Mm-hmm. It was different back then. You'd have a couple thousand people show up for a class of 20. So it was extremely competitive. And but as it turns out, looking back on my career, the jobs I didn't get were a gift because it wasn't the right lane for me to be in. I wouldn't have had the same opportunities that I would have had that looking back on it, I'm like, that all worked out just perfectly.
Yeah.
That I got the ability to run like I wanted to. So I know it's frustrating when folks, like if you're a young firefighter coming up and or you're trying to get on the job or you're trying to get a promotion, and you could just feel very frustrated with that. But take it from an old guy. When you look back, it's going to work out fine. It'll be fine. Sometimes that no is a gift.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the very rapid version of the career path. Just started as a volunteer, became a career firefighter. Just those promotions all just kind of happened. It's weird. I came along kind of like riding a wave of organizational growth where most of the policies and procedures we put in place, we were making as we went. We were literally building the airplane as we were flying it. So, like I said, it was all an accident. It was never from the time my buddy said, "I wonder how old you have to be," to where I am now. It's all been one random ping pong ball going down just banging through life.
Riding the wave. I like that
Yes, sir.
analogy. The fire department can feel like that sometimes. It's such a such a rush, and you never know kind of where the current will take you. So that's a really interesting backstory. Thanks for sharing that. And
Yeah.
and throughout the course of this interview, we're gonna get into some different elements of your career. We'll talk about the data side, the administrative side, the training side. So we'll be able to get a little bit more of that information hopefully throughout the course of this. But I want to start with some of your time in training, because one of the things, I chatted with some people before this interview, and obviously you're a pretty well-known guy, certainly in the area where I am. I work for Henrico Fire Department, which is right next door to Hanover, where you used to work, and so a lot of people had different opinions on what should I ask you. And the big thing that people wanted to know about was, just talk us through the development of Slice RS. This is such a foundational concept in the fire service, and you had such a pivotal role in the development and the proliferation of it. So just talk us through that. And then one more kind of knock onto that is, we talked a little bit before we started recording how doing new things in the fire department can be intimidating. Firefighters, I can't remember who said the quote. It was Jason Patton said, firefighters can be the most supportive and unsupportive people.
Mhm.
And so, I don't know, just tell us a little bit about that. And what was it like doing something new like that, totally uncharted territory?
Well, the Slice RS concept also was an accident. We didn't set out to, we had no idea it would be what it was or what it became. The genesis of that was when I was the president of the ISFSI. We're close to DC, like we can get up there in a couple of hours depending on traffic, and I would go to a lot of meetings up there, and I would often run into Dan Madrikowski, who's kind of the lead researcher in fire dynamics over the last couple decades, and he would show me what he was working on. And this is when like they were just starting to have some of the early high-rise studies and some of the things, Governor's Island, some of that kind of stuff. And uh, he would show me what he was working on, and I would tell him he was crazy. I always joke, I'm like the first guy he made mad with this stuff. I just happened to be close to him when he was doing it. And I would go home and tell my chief what Dan said. And it got to be Fred Crosby was our chief at the time, one of the right chiefs at the right time. And I would go home and tell Fred what Dan said. And it got to be a pattern. Like every time I go to a meeting, I come back and what do you say now? And we would talk about it. And finally, we accumulated so much information that one day Fred goes, "Don't you think we should do something about it? Don't we know enough now that we should change the way we operate based on this research that we're seeing?" And I was like, yeah, you probably should. I don't know how. I have no idea how to do it. How would you approach a change in that way, right? So the way we kind of came up with it was me and Jason Burrows. I remember we were standing in my office at a whiteboard, and we were kind of doing a mental exercise of what would happen if we're so programmed. I watched some of our engine companies work for a few fires, and it didn't matter where the fire was. It didn't matter what was going on. They were going to the front door, and that was it. I mean, it was just like a robot. I'm like, how do we change that thinking? How do we change that? It's almost a cultural, traditional thing at this point. And so we said, what if we took the game pieces off the board? What if we took all the chess pieces and put them away and put them back on the game board based on what we know now?
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of the mental exercise we were doing to come up with that. And we just got lucky. It spelled something. But Hey, look, it spells the thing. All right,
Yeah.
well, that's handy. That's a training tool we could use. And we really only intended that for us. It was something we were putting together for our fire department, which was about I don't know, they're probably still working on that change. I don't think you ever stopped working on that. Uh, but, so we took it to our department. It was working for us. I had access to the instructor society, and they were developing some stuff as well. And it kind of the principles of modern fire attack program they had kind of wrapped around that acronym, and off you go. I mean, next thing you know, I still get phone calls about it. So it was interesting we didn't mean for it to be what it is. It was just a tool we created to help us. And
Hmm.
trying to manage change like that, trying to do something that seems almost impossible to do. Um, we had to eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? I have this philosophy of managing change. If people will say something's impossible, or they say you can't do that, right? That's just kind of the default response to a new way of thinking or doing. And I've always thought that, well, the better way to do this is what conditions would have to exist for that to be successful.
Hmm.
What would be work it backwards, start with the end in mind, right? Like, so what conditions would have to happen for us to be able to get something like that to be adopted and implemented in an organization? So the first thing we thought was, well, we got to get the chief, the command staff on board first. That's going to be the first thing. And those are probably the toughest customers, as far as getting their buy-in on what the fire dynamics and understanding the science and all the little nuances of that. But once they got it, it didn't take them long to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Just took some patience. And once they got latched onto it, that you've got a lot more momentum now, right? Like we're moving things a lot better. And then just kept going down the chain. So we didn't really talk about it until we had got down to the battalion level. It was kind of a top secret project, so to speak, And once we got down to the battalion level, we started to expand out pretty quickly. And then, the battalion, once the battalions were trained up on it, and we did that. We did that kind of privately. We brought the battalions out on their own. Like we didn't bring the engine companies there right away. We got the battalions up to speed because we wanted time to play with it, figure out what the nuances were, get hands on with this thing and see how it would work. And and that also gave us time to not feel like we were being watched or judged while we did it, kind of a private session, so to speak. And I think that was key. And like I said, there's still, I remember writing the first written piece on it, and I was going to send it off to the magazine or the website or somewhere, wherever it was going. And I remember looking at the send button before I hit it, thinking, well, here we go. Once I hit this send button, I can't get it back. It's going to be a thing. And social media was around by then, and like, well, you just know you're going to get absolutely hammered. But at the same time, I still believe today, and I think the science has proven us that we were right. We were headed down the right road, and we knew it would be difficult. But also, I knew I had the same reaction when I first heard this stuff. I thought it was a bunch of nonsense and was crazy stuff that this science just was telling me. I had that same reaction. I just knew that when we put it into the social media world, it was going to go to scale. Yep. You're going to have that reaction on a bigger level. But at the same time, it's the right thing to do. I figured everybody figured it out eventually, right? Sooner or later, time would work itself out. With any major change in the fire service, sometimes you have to be patient. You have to over communicate, and sometimes you have to let attrition take care of it too. Like this, some people will never get it, and that's fine. But I did learn in the process. I wouldn't be intimidated by resistance to change in the fire service. I would take that as a sign of progress. You're not going to change the fire service in any meaningful way without making it a little mad first, right?
Yeah.
You're going to pay it off one time or until people get upset about it, you're not making progress. That's a sign of progress. So you just can't take it personally. Post and ghost is the thing we use.
Sorry, say that again.
Post and ghost. Post
Okay.
and ghost. So you use the social media platform for what you needed to do to distribute information, but don't read the comments.
Man,
Don't
Let's
read the
just
comments.
clip that right there. That's
Just post
that's
and
incredible.
ghost.
Post and
Leave
ghost. I
it, leave
love
it
that.
be, man. And a lot of times, if you think about it, I wish I had $1 for every social media post that I wrote and I deleted it before I posted it. Like I'd write a response, and I'm like, no, I better not say
Yep.
that. So, and plus, you legitimize the argument by participating. So, just post and go. So use the tool for what it's there for, to distribute information, but you don't have to entertain every argument.
I love that. I honestly love that. Let me ask a quick follow-up question, and man, this is maybe more for me than for the audience. But
Mm-hmm.
how do you steel yourself? Because you're talking about you get a lot of feedback, like you roll out something new, and some of it's going to be positive, and some of it's going to be negative. How do you steel yourself to be ready for that criticism that is coming and not take it personally? Because I know you mentioned just don't take it personally. I think that's one of those easier said than done things. How do you steel yourself um, for something like that?
Well, it has to be the right thing to do, right? I think that's at the end of the day. I think I know for a fact that the work that Dan Madrikowski, Steve Kerber, FSRI, the work that those folks are doing is saving firefighter lives.
Yep,
It hands down is.
no question.
So if somebody wants to call me a name or give me a hard time about something that in the long run helps further that agenda to save firefighters' lives, make them operate safer, more efficient, I don't care. Go ahead. You know, that's your opinion. That's fine. It doesn't affect my day. It's all good. I mean, that's what it takes. Um, I think you have to that those precursors have to be there. It has to be something that's important. It has to have value to the fire service. It has to be the right thing to do. And if that was the case, I guess it's really we're talking now about courage a little bit, right?
Yep.
Like courage is interesting. I always have been. It's interesting to watch it and think about it. Like to do the right thing when you're going to take a beating like that, like in social media or whatever it might be. Uh, that to me, that's a more important, like standing up for your brothers and sisters in the firehouse. A rumor comes around and you don't know whether it's true or not. Uh, that's a moment to show a little courage to
Amen.
shut that rumor down, right? To call it out when you see something wrong. That's courage. You get to demonstrate that level of courage every day, uh,
Yeah.
as opposed to like the tactical courage we think about, which is often mistaken for stupidity, or luck. Uh, we do some stuff we didn't really think about out there in the field sometimes, but you
Yep.
get an opportunity to be courageous every day in the firehouse and do the
Yep.
right thing. So I don't know. I don't know if there's any. It hurts, right? It sucks when I've walked into places at major conferences and you could feel the whole room look at you,
Hmm.
like, oh, it's that guy.
Yeah.
That like, yeah, I'm that guy. I'll be that guy if that's what it takes to get where we're going. Uh, that's just the reality of it. I think if you believe in it and you think it's the right thing to do, then you gotta ride that ride till you get to where you're going,
Yeah.
you know?
I really like what you said about courage and how, I think sometimes we conflate what I'll call physical courage with social courage. And I think that's just so right on. I think it takes just as much courage to stand up to a room full of your peers to defend something unpopular as it does to, I don't know, do any, and physical courage is something that we have in spades. Firefighters there's no shortage of that. I think the social courage is a more interesting question. So I'm glad to hear you bring that up. Thank you for saying that. And
Absolutely.
very well put. Well, let me move on to something else that I've been really excited to talk to you about. And, so it's no surprise the kind of the focus of my podcast here is how do you get things done in the fire department, more specifically projects. And I think projects is just kind of an academic way of saying how do you get stuff done. You want to put out a new piece of equipment, you want to build a new fire station, you want to spec out a new ladder truck, whatever, that's got to be a project. And so you've had the opportunity to see projects get done from multiple different perspectives within the fire department through the training lens, through the administrative lens, through the operational lens, through this, I guess we could call it the IT lens. What are some lessons that you have learned or things that you would like to pass along to people that are trying to get stuff done in the fire department?
I think some of the key components that make successful projects in the fire service, particularly, uh, I think the first thing that comes to mind is probably diversity.
Hmm.
It's easy, and I don't mean that in a social racial context. I mean in the diversity of perspective,
Hmm.
right? So let's say we're designing an apparatus. We're going to do an apparatus spec as an example. Uh, I have my thoughts about it based on when I rode fire trucks, but that was a minute ago. And, I have an administrative perspective on that of how I want it to look, feel, ride, do all, perform. But I'm not the person on it. I'm not I'm not the one that's going to ride on this thing. So I want to have the person that's going to ride a unit like this. I want their perspective.
Hmm.
I want to know what's important to them, and build a team that will have all the perspectives. I want the technology. I want the tactics. I want the finance, the logistics, the repair and maintenance. If somebody's going to maintain this apparatus, I want somebody from fleet to look at this thing. All of these different perspectives matter when you design something like that. And then set the right parameters for the team. I think that's something that we weren't taught in our officer training, was how to really articulate the, you call it parameters, a team charter, or whatever term you want to use, to give them their marching orders. Like, here's your time frame, here are your resources, here are your guardrails of what you can and cannot do. Let me know if I can, if there's a roadblock, I'm there to remove it. But at the end of the day, I want the input of the team.
Yeah.
It's interesting exercise. I always notice too, when teams work, if you're the highest ranking officer in the room or on the team, I've come to the kind of believe that I think maybe you should speak last. Like, right, like I want to define the framework of the meeting. I want to tell you what those guardrails are and what your resources are. But then I feel like I need to step back.
Yeah.
If I'm the first one to talk and shape my opinion out there on this project, what did I bring to other people for? Right. It's there. Well, the chief's already spoken,
Right.
so I feel like, set the parameters and get out of the way, let the team work. And then I might close it. Right. Like, so what I've heard you guys say is these things, and then package that up into action items, make sure we have something to run with. But that would be what I would say is you want to get diversity of perspective involved in that. You want to get out of the way. If you're the senior officer in that environment, let the team work. That's what you brought them there for. And then I would also add, kind of as a finisher on that topic, is to look for opportunity for systems.
Hmm.
If you're doing something repetitively, anything more than once, okay, is there opportunity for this to become a system? Is this going to be like speccing an apparatus versus an apparatus replacement plan?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That becomes a system. So I'd love to use the example of bay doors. That was something
Please talk about bay doors. You'll have a lot of
we
viewers in Henrico very eager to hear your thoughts on this.
yeah, we were spending, like, for Hanover, our bay door, and this wasn't my genius idea. This was my battalion chief, Chris Hubbard, cooked this whole thing up. He's one of the most brilliant people I ever worked with. He recognized that our bay door repair was in our regular repair and maintenance line. And it's expensive, man. When you replace a bay door, you're talking big money.
Big money.
So it was eating up our repair and maintenance line to the point that we couldn't do other projects. Like, it was really, really becoming a problem. So he created a system. We went to the finance department and said, let's take this bay door repair line item and let's make this into a bay door repair program, so that we're systematically replacing bay doors on a cycle. That pulls it into a different type of budget line, gets it out of my repair and maintenance line, so that it's not impacting me being able to fix, some other part of a firehouse or whatever. Package that up in a system, and then it's easier for you to work with, like, your finance department and local government to try to fund that. Right? It changes the funding equation a little bit. Mm-hmm. So we found that to be pretty effective. It was funny when we first proposed that we were going to. We proposed we replace a full set of doors on a fire station once a year. Every year, we were at 7, just got to 17 stations. So you're looking at, a couple of years. It takes us a while to get back around to replace a set of doors. And the finance department actually suggested we replace one door a year. And we were like, no, one door on a firehouse, that's going to look a little funky,
Yeah.
when got one door looks different than the others and those types of things. So we finally negotiated to replace one side. Like we got
Hmm.
the four front doors, because those are the ones that go up the most, to build that into a system. So it's just anything in that along those lines. You're going to be doing something a lot. What HVAC, it could be bay doors, could be anything that's a repetitive, kind of a nuisance almost to your what you're trying to do in the broader scale. Systems work better. You can budget better for systems. You can kind of, I say, market. You can shop that within your local government as a project. Get your finance department's help, to help you with that. Your local administration can help you with that. So that would be, I guess, my advice for something along those lines.
I love that. One thing I want to dig in on before, and because we've got a lot of topics I want to ask you about, but I want to dig in on something you said. So just help us understand, what do you mean by systems? Like, so let's take an example, the bay doors. So when you say you created a system, just at a very molecular level, what do you mean by a system?
It has to stand on its own feet,
Hmm.
right? So imagine if you had to write this out as a project. So you would, kind of like almost the same, not that far from talking about a team charter or something. And now I have a project. Instead of talking about people, I'm talking about a task, or a project like that, where I have whatever it might be. It could be apparatus, could be some part of a facility, could be some equipment that we're using, whatever it is, where it's repetitive and costly. Uh, I want to be able to articulate what that is. So define it, uh, talk about what is required for it to be successful. What is it? It's cyclical, so it's going to cycle, right? So it's not going to happen and we do it and then it stops and it's over. It's going to be typically something that happens on an ongoing basis. So that becomes part of your budget planning. So we build these systems in, uh, and then we can define it, market it. I say market it internally with your administration and fund it, and then manage it, right? So one of the challenges we have in the fire service is we transfer people, right? Like you you
Sorry,
you get bumped around.
I gotta plug this in real quick.
Okay, you get bumped around. You might be in logistics today, but next year you get assigned back to ops. So how do you articulate what's going on to the next guy?
Hmm.
So that's the other thing about a system. It's actually written down so that when the next guy sits in the seat, the next guy or gal, they can look at this and go, they can understand it. Okay, this is what we're doing. This is the purpose. This is what it costs. This is how we manage it. To have something like a structure
Yeah.
that I can, work with, so that articulated during transfers. That's been a challenge my whole career was, I even after I retired and I went to the private sector, I would get calls all the time from somebody in one of the companies that goes, "Hey, this fire department," we would say, "went dark. I couldn't, like our contact's not there anymore. We don't know what happened."
Yeah.
And sure enough, somebody got transferred, and sometimes they didn't get any pass along. So they're just sitting down there looking at, like, well, what's opening drawers to see what's going on.
Been
So
there.
that's another part of, or the advantage of developing systems. It's very easy to transfer that knowledge to the next person.
Yeah, and repeatable results as well. Another thing I
Yep.
really like is a lot of times we run a project and it'll be superstar dependent. And if you have a really sharp captain or battalion chief, then you're going to get a great product. But like you're saying, they turn over and now you get somebody
Mm-hmm.
new, and then that same project now it's a completely different result. And so one of the things I've really learned about systems is that yeah, it's gonna like you're saying, it's gonna save you a lot of heartache on the front end, and then on the back end you're gonna get a consistent product. Like every time you do an equipment rollout, the policies get updated, the communication gets done, the training is complete, it's documented, so you get a more repeatable and consistent outcome, which is worth its weight in gold in fire
And that's
administration.
measurable. Yeah, having that
Yeah.
data that supports that system's even, it's a whole nother, that's probably the next thing we'll
Yeah.
talk about.
Exactly. You read my mind. Um, which that's actually the perfect segue. And so one of the things that you talk about a lot nowadays is more of a technology focus and a lot of discussion around data. And so I think that's so fascinating because I think data, so every fire department under the sun will tell you data-driven department. It's almost like a mantra. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around data. Where is it? Where do we find it? What can it tell us? How valuable is it? So if you could just give us kind of the 101 understanding of what does data mean and where does it come from and what can it tell us?
Well, if you look at most fire departments and what they measure, it's usually focuses around response times, right? So how fast we can process a call, how fast we can get out the door, how fast we can negotiate traffic and arrive on scene. If you're really fancy, you might actually track the whole alarm. You might, the whole effective response force getting on scene. Uh, well, it's funny that most of our data that we're used to tracking, it all stops when we get ready to go to work.
Hmm.
Like, as soon as we hit the air brake, all of the metrics stop. So if I was to look at that and if I came from another planet and didn't know what the purpose of this agency was, this thing, I would think you were like a race car team or something, like your pit crew. So you race from one place to the other. That's what's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what our data would say, right? When in fact, there's so much more to measure beyond the air brake. Data beyond the air brake. That's one of my little kind of things I've coined as I think is important. And we're just now starting to have the capacity for some of that stuff, where we're actually like Nearest, for example, the data schema that is live January 1. So if you haven't done it yet, I'm not sure when this airs, but probably want to get on it.
Yep.
There are metrics inside of that data schema that capture tactics beyond the air brake. Now, there's still challenges for us to be able to mitigate. We have to figure out how to measure that. Like, how is that going to get into the CAD? How is that going to get to the Nearest database? Is that going to be, because we want the data capture to be have as less human involvement in it as we can. We want to automate as much of it as possible. But even though, like, your on scene time, it's still a human either hitting a button on an MDT or your radio transmission to the dispatcher who keys it in. I mean, there's still a human interaction. They can forget.
Yep.
So we have a lot of work to do to try to automate that data capture, but we're getting there. But I think we don't really know what we don't know yet when it comes to tactics. Like, if you walked into an engine company and said, are you guys good to go? You guys ready to fight fire? They're going to say, yeah. Well, how do you know? Well, I mean, we have some anecdotal things. We are here. We feel like we're good.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't really know. We don't know. Like, how long does it take you to generate a fire stream? From air brake to water. What's that average? What's the 90th percentile on that?
Mm-hmm.
We don't really know. Nobody's ever really measured that. I had the guys at Phoenix. I was talking to the training staff at Phoenix over the last couple of years, and they've been doing some really interesting work on trying to articulate what those things should actually be. To the point that they leveraged a whole bunch of different technology using just various Microsoft products, things they could get a hold of, to really try to capture what an engine company performance should look like. And they ran an initial drill and the thing about Phoenix is they can get a data set like few can, right? Because they have so many. So I think it was like 3,000 firefighters or something went through this thing. So it's a pretty substantial data set. And they found that there was a bell curve, as usual. And what they were interested in doing was, they called it narrowing the gap, where you have your high performers that are really good at skills, and they could capture that. Things from air brake to force a door, air brake to water, air brake to primary complete. These types of tactics they measured. And then when they found the high performers, they wanted to look at the lower performers on the other side of the bell curve and how to bring those performers up closer to the front, right? Like, so they provided some remediation training. They actually put a bunch of those forcible entry props at the particular fire stations that needed it, gave them plenty of opportunity to improve those skills. And when they ran that drill again later, they could prove in the data that they had in fact narrowed the gap. That training was in fact effective, and they perform at a higher level as the whole fire department. So these are the kinds of things. I don't think on a national scale we have much understanding of it all yet. I think we'll start to get there. It's going to take us we're probably 5 years from getting any kind of really solid understanding of that out of nearest. And the technology is going to help us as we go to bring some automation to the data capture. But I think that's why it's important to me. It's almost like an extension of the fire dynamics training, right?
Mm.
We there was a lot we didn't understand about how fuels and conditions changed inside of a structure fire. So we've modified our tactics to accommodate that. Now we're going to start to refine that, kind of sharpening our edge even more because we'll have access to data to really show us where we need to focus. How do we get as good as we possibly can be? I mean, when would you ever be good enough, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's a destination that you would reach where you would, say that, okay, we're good enough now.
Right.
You can always be a little bit faster. So that's why the data thing is so important. And it's not just about response times. That's the easy stuff. I'm more interested what happens after we pop the brake
Yeah.
and we go to work. That's where I want to measure the data. And the technology is we're right here at the beginning of doing some really interesting stuff. A lot of meetings I attend now are related to firefighter location and biometrics.
Mm.
That's kind of the hot topic right now, is being able to track firefighters in real time on an X, Y, and Z axis. So it's interesting to watch that technology evolve. The Z axis was always kind of the real problem. We could track you on a flat plane, but we couldn't tell you what floor you were on,
Hmm.
right? So it's we need to be able to do that,
Yeah.
before we really get any meaningful tracking. We got to be able to know what floor you're on. So they figured that out. Surprisingly, barometric pressure played a role in that, but they figured out how to do that uh, with some fair accuracy. Now the challenge is actually kind of going back to the X and Y axis. Is the how do we transmit that data? GPS, cellular connections, the backbone of how that information is captured and transmitted. That's now where we're wrestling with. But and then biometrics. I was being an old training guy. There was a case up in New York where a recruit died during a SCBA drill, and there was a lot of scrutiny about what happened. The instructional staff got a lot of scrutiny about what went on there, and I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, but I've been in their shoes where I've had a firefighter or recruit, face down in a prop, fully buttoned up, SCBA on air, the whole bit, and I don't know what shape they're in. Right? I mean, how do I know? Unless they tell me, I don't really know.
Yep.
Uh, so I could see how that could be a challenge, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I'm looking at the daggone astronauts got all this stuff on. I can see what their heart rate is and what their biometrics are. Can't we figure this out?
Yeah.
And my watch is capturing all this data on me right now. So it's not that the technology doesn't exist; it's just not available to us.
Mm-hmm.
I want it on my pane of glass in the command post.
Yep.
So that's where we are now. I think that to me, that's some of the most important work we could be doing at this point. I feel like the training side of the house, the tactics and the training side of the house is much better than it was 15, 20 years ago. They've made a lot of progress. And now that where the battle is, I like to say where there's grass to cut is out there in the technology data side
Yeah.
of getting this technology to where our SCBAs, our radios, and whatever else technology is going to be involved. There's still debate about what hardware we're going to do location with and those types of things. Some hands-free communication, being able to say a mayday without having to push a button on the radio
Mm-hmm.
and having it pick it up. That's possible today. It's probably not on your rig like most people. You know what I mean? We need to get it out there, and we got to find a way to make this technology. It's got to work. It's got to be simple. Do what it needs to do without getting in the way,
Yeah.
and be affordable. So there's lots of work to do in that area in that space right now. So
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting, and I'm sure you're right about the grass being, to borrow your phrase there, the grass being the technology side. I think you've made a very compelling case for why data is so important. If you were going to talk to any chief that's listening, and they wanted to invest in data, the like collecting data, interpreting data for their department, but they don't have a ton of resources to invest in a data analyst or a data engineer or whatever. What are some concrete steps that a chief or an agency head could take to improve their data and technology section, but specifically the data?
Data specifically,
Like, is
you're
there
going
good
to need
training
a
out there for this? Sorry, go ahead.
is there a what?
Is there good training out there for this?
There are some groups. There is a group that the IFC has called Fire Analyst Data Working Group.
Hmm.
It doesn't cost anything to join, and you just show up. They meet at most of the major conferences, usually as a pre-conference. And that's a group of folks that are interested in data. They're, everybody's kind of there's some people that are really good at it, some people that are just trying to figure out what to do next. That's a good place. There's also another data group. Gosh, I can't think of the acronym. Association of Fire Emergency Services Data Analysts. There's another group that actually costs a little bit to join, but that's where like the really high end data folks are. That's the people that are doing it as a job. They're over there, but you're not excluded. To show up if you're trying to learn more about data, particularly if I wasn't a data guy. I'm as I've always done in my life. I'm just stumbling into rooms and seeing what's going on.
Hmm.
And so I'm stumbled into the data room. And you start meeting people, building relationships, and you're going to need a good relationship with your IT department. Go over there and bring them donuts. Do something. Go over there and be nice, and get those relationships in place so that they're there to help you. You're going to feel like they're going to slow you down, but they're there to help you and protect you. I used to wrestle with mine and say, "Don't tell me no, tell me how." Right, and then I'll figure it out. And then there's some third-party technologies you can look at. A couple of different options there. One of them I used to work at, where you can speak to them if you've got a little budget. They can help you out with and do some pretty amazing things. It's amazing what they can do, what's
Yeah.
possible if you know how to do it. So I think that's the first step is if you don't know where to start, just go show up.
Hmm.
Go show up. Go talk to your local university, or there's lots of ways you can find help to do that. They might be looking, some of the statistics classes, or somebody might be looking to do a little real world work. Uh,
That's a great suggestion.
Maybe you can partner up with them and get some help. So there's plenty of ways to do it. Like I said, when I'm trying to solve a problem, what conditions would have to exist for me to be successful here?
Yep. Hmm.
And I'm going to need, how can I work back from that and start just go hunt, go show up to these things. And I think you'll find the culture in this community, the data community, is really accepting, and they're like, "Yep, we understand. We've all been there too," and they'll do all they can to help you. I haven't seen anybody be kind of territorial about what they're doing. They're usually very willing to share how they did whatever.
I think that's a good thing for people to hear, that this is a very welcoming, the data community within the fire service is very welcoming. I think it can be very intimidating, the concept of data, and especially if you're coming at it from a sort of an amateur perspective, it looks like a field that, we just don't feel like we belong in. So I think that's good. That's good for a lot of people to hear that, no, it's not like that. And this is a very welcoming group.
And I barely got out of math with a passing grade, much less
Well, I can
do
relate to
anything
that for
fancy.
sure.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I got one more thing I want to talk about with you, and you've been extremely generous with your time, but I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about AI in the fire service. And this is something I've been trying to talk about more, and just get different opinions about where it's at, what people are using it for, and then maybe just where this is going. So I would consider you a subject matter expert on this just because of your, engagement with the technology side of the fire service. What do you think? What's your take on AI?
I'm a fan of it. I don't think most people understand it, of what its real value is, and how it's going to connect us to a safer operational environment. So yes, you can use it to do tasks. I'm in it all day, every day. If I do anything I do on my computer that I do more than once or twice, I've built a custom GPT to do that. All I do is just ask it and I'm done.
Right.
Speeds up my day tremendously. That's the easy stuff. I interviewed a guy. In fact, I've got his from Waldorf University. He's not there anymore. I still got his
Hmm.
card on my desk. I interviewed him like a year ago. Um, he walked me through a scenario of what's going to be possible. It's not there yet. There think of, you have all these different AI functions. You could have it inside of your records management. You can have it inside of your SCBA, even, inside of your various, your apparatus tracking, AVL, all the things. What AI will eventually be able to do, which you can do now, it's just not in a scalable and affordable manner, is to put all that together. So he walked me through an incident to where an AI is using hardware that's not quite mass produced yet, but using smart glasses was his example, where you have audio and you have a visual cue that's connected to your vehicle that is the AI engine, right? So like a neural network. You have an AI sitting on top of other AIs. So this AI can talk to all the other AIs and put a lot of information together based on your protocol and how you want to operate. So he walked me through like a dispatching a call. Hey, Chief, you've been dispatched to this. Would you like me to route you? Yes, please do. And you get routing in your glasses, a little arrow of what to do. You hear an auditory cue, something on your MDT. As you're en route, it's noticed through the AVL tracking that your third due engine was at the shop, and they're not going to be third due. They're going to actually be like fourth. The Chief, we noticed that your arrival sequence is going to be out. Your third due engine is not going to be third. Would you like us to change the assignment or leave it as is? All this interaction is, you're basically, the best way I could describe it, it sounds just like a battalion aid. So, we never could fund it. I know y'all tried,
We're
right?
close. We're not there yet.
But having that, we call them field incident technicians is the new term, or whatever you want to call them. I call them battalion aid. I'm old. So having that battalion aid there to do the things, the command functions that you wouldn't have time to do as a chief. Imagine a situation like that, to where it's feeding you information without getting in the way. It's feeding you in the context of your operation. So it's not bombarding you with stuff you don't need to know right now, just the key information that you need to know at this moment. It recognizes that this is the thing, and now you need to know this information. You can incorporate that with some firefighter tracking, biometrics, standard operating procedures, command boards. We really got to get firefighters off of these whiteboards, get fire chiefs off these whiteboards in the back of these buggies. It's 2000 and almost 26. Come on, man. It's time to let the whiteboard go, and start to incorporate some real technology. We're using manual timers and things for reminders. It's like it's 1980 back here in the back of the command buggy. We need to bring that into the next century here, so that we can leverage this technology. We got to not screw it up. The pendulum swings, and we tend to take it a little far. But I think if we're methodical, we have some technology plans. I'll say the biggest thing I'm concerned with about technology, particularly related to AI, is how do you budget for something that moves so quick?
Yeah.
So if the technology changes month to month, and you want me to have a 3-year technology plan, how are we going to do that?
Yeah.
You're asking me to budget for things that haven't been released to market yet. That could be something our firefighters really need. So it's almost like you have to budget for placeholders. You have to kind of leave it a little bit ambiguous as to what exactly you're going to do with that money, which is hard in local government. But I think that's for the admin chiefs out there. I would put that bug in your ear. Is you got to figure out how to budget for this. How can you budget in a way that keeps pace with technology?
Yeah.
And that's a real challenge. Yeah. So, but I think AI is going to be, the guys and gals coming on recruit school now, there'll be a ton of automation of the AI is going to be watching your back once we get it refined and get it at scale to where we can, put it everywhere. Then we got to figure out I do want it everywhere. Like, use the example of the AFG grants. There's still fire departments that don't have turnout gear, right? That have never, they're still using, they're passing turnout gear around. How are we going to get technology? How are we going to get this technology rolled out on scale? I don't know. That's going to be a challenge. Probably something further downrange that, I'll be at the corner bar seat in Key West by then, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I mean, I think that's a really interesting perspective. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot with AI, and I was having this conversation with a guy I work with. In the fire service, we have the essentially a business model where you go from being in the field, you're a good firefighter, you get promoted to lieutenant, you're a good company officer, you get promoted to captain, maybe now you move into admin, and now that you're in administration, you've been on the job for 15, 20 years maybe, but you've only been doing administrative work for one or two. And if you were to look at, your counterpart in another agency, like you go across the street, now you're in the HR section or the legal section or risk management, the person that's doing your job, let's just say you're the battalion chief of support services or whatever, the person that's managing the equivalent of that in finance has been in the workplace as long as you, 15 years, but they've been doing exclusively this work for 15 years, budgeting, spreadsheets, you name it, all those things. And for us, we're essentially doing two jobs. We have to stay proficient in operations because we could go back to operations and you at some point will. And so you have to be a captain, a battalion chief or whatever, but you also have to know how to do budget cycles and all these other things. And so what I think is really interesting about AI, I see in the very short term, even right now, it can really close that gap to make it a little bit more, a little bit less of a harsh transition. You can ask ChatGPT, hey, I've got this Excel table. How do I do this? Or explain what an RFP is to me, like I'm in fifth grade or whatever. And I think it can really close that gap. I'm curious what you think about that.
I think it's a tool that we haven't had up until the last couple of years. I'm just still learning. The company I work for now, First Do, we are very, very involved in artificial intelligence and doing some amazing stuff with it, and stuff you wouldn't even think about. Building GPT coaches for yourself.
Hmm.
You can, if I want to improve a presentation, I could go in. I'll tell you a little secret, guys. If you're in training, you can go into a Teams call, just you. You don't have to invite anybody else. Do your presentation in the Teams call, record it, right? Then take the transcript and the video, build your custom GPT. This is acting as a fire service training professional. Coach me on how to improve this presentation, right? You build
Wow.
your custom GPT for that, then load your transcript in and let it coach you, right? You've got it's unbelievable. you know, it's
That's
unbelievable what you could do.
Yeah, you
It's
actually took the idea right out of my head. I was going to ask you for my final question here,
yeah,
which we'll still keep this as the final question. I'm going to put you on the spot with another one though.
yeah.
Tell us your best Chat GPT or AI prompt or use case. What are you using it for? What's Eddie Buchanan using AI for? Your favorite use case or your favorite prompt?
Probably the one I'm using the most right now. Um, I do that for I use a GPT for case studies. I do a lot of case studies for my company now. I can crank out a case study. We could have a conversation where I just talk to you for a few minutes. I can take that transcript and I can have a polished case study in just a few minutes.
Hmm.
If I want to know anything about a fire department, I can build a custom GPT that tells me everything there is to know about that fire department based on what I've told it. I want to know, who the officer, the chief is, what the population, square mileage, call volume, get a quick profile. You can do that in a hot second. Anything that, like I said, anything you do more than a couple times a day, you really ought to consider building a GPT for it. And some people are, like he could be a little intimidating. I don't know about building a GPT. All you got to do is talk to it.
Hmm.
So you just go into voice mode and have a conversation with the thing and tell it, I need you to ask me if you need better, if you need more information, ask me. And then you're in a conversation with this thing and it will get you a functioning GPT that you can use to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. So whether it be learn more about, how to put a budget together or how to create I know a lot of guys I've talked to are doing their apparatus replacement plans. They're
Hmm.
updating those by loading that data into the GPT and spits out a updated apparatus replacement plan in a couple of minutes.
Hmm.
Um, it's going to speed up your work. It doesn't replace you. It's not going to be creative, so to speak, right? The creativity is going to come from you. But if you're, as far as the task, doing task level stuff, there's no reason you couldn't leverage some form of AI for that, whatever you use. I have a couple of different ones I use for different things, so their knowledge base might be different, right? If I want to know what's happening like right now today, I might use like a Grok or something like that. And if I'm going to do something that's more work related, I'm going to use a chat GPT for that. It just depends on what their language model is, right? Is it up to date, like moment by moment, which seldom they are, but they might be, within a day. Or where you might want to, or maybe you're using a corporate GPT where it's only inside its world. You're not sharing information. You have to be cautious of that. I would tell every fire department, if you don't have a policy on AI, you better get one, because you don't want your folks writing patient narratives in the public one.
Yes.
So you have to be mindful of that. So yeah, man. I mean, I use the fire department profile a lot. I use case study generation a lot. All those types of things are definitely the way to go. And I use it to improve my presentations.
Amazing. Chief Eddie Buchanan, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, man. Certainly an honor to be here, Peter. I appreciate all the work you're doing, man. Keep going down that road. You're doing great stuff.
Thank you, sir.